was Edward Snowden. His name was Edward Snowden. His name was Edward Snowden. Hi, everybody. Welcome again to another edition of The Story Behind the Story. I'm your Tuesday, Wednesday host, Alex Studer, coming to you from the back of a rusted-out ice cream truck somewhere under a bridge in the beautiful city of San Francisco. Today is Tuesday, June 11th, 2013. How are you folks doing today? My, oh my, do we have a topic for today. First of all, I want to apologize on True's behalf. I know that he feels awful about not having been able to make it to the microphone for the last 2 days of this show. Yesterday, Monday, and Friday before that. Both days he had been planning to bring to you folks more about, I'm sure, weather modification and comments about his presentation at ConspiracyCon here last week in Santa Clara. But apparently on each of those days, circumstances beyond his control presented themselves just prior to the show, causing him to have to sort of reroute and not be able to do the show. And I'll leave it to him to make any further explanations if you know. But just so you folks know, he's not trying to leave you out in the dry, and no, he's not under any more attack, as far as I am aware, beyond the one that he spoke of upon his return right from last week. And folks, if you didn't hear, sounds classic to me, right out of the stories of TIs, otherwise called Targeted Individuals, as spoken of in the third installation of the series of documentary films and publications by Marshall Thomas entitled Monarch, the New Phoenix Program. And basically, folks, it's sounding very clear that True himself was targeted by some form of beam weaponry that caused him to go into a state of cardiac arrest, basically. He was able to overcome that, but then apparently on inspection by the emergency room staff, his blood work came all back negative for any of the indicators, the markers that are so often seen to indicate a heart attack. So just doing the math on that, it's seemingly quite clear that that's what happened to him. I wish the best for him. I'm saying prayers for him and his family. Folks, this is not a fun thing to be doing for a lot of people. This is, as others might call us, hurling mud and calling names, and they really don't like what we're saying because we're exposing some real truths that a lot of people have been working so hard to keep concealed. But we're not. I mean, I don't know. I can only speak for myself. And those around me in my circle. If they were ingenuine, I wouldn't want to be friends with them. Let's put it that way. But we're not fame seekers, okay? And that's the slogan being tossed around by the Bopsy twins, as I refer to them, and that's been their whole angle of attack toward me, at least, since they first found out who I was, and good for them. But no, I'm not doing this because I'm seeking any recognition, folks. This, in fact, is a dangerous business. Sticking your neck out and uncovering truths that powerful groups do not want known is a dangerous business. And, I've seen people die. My uncle, who I spoke of, I told you folks the story of my life when I first came on the air. I believe very strongly that my uncle was whacked, and in a direct consequence of his sticking his neck out and being a whistleblower. So, folks, I think what we have to talk about today, and most likely tomorrow too, I don't see there's any way I'm going to get through everything I want to say today in 2 hours' time. But we're going to talk about whistleblowers, because I think what we have seen this past weekend is someone who chose of his own volition to be named. He chose to be revealed. He's very methodically planned out how these revelations are going to be released. But I strongly suggest that this guy is going to go down in history as probably the most influential and remembered whistleblower in our history. And that's after guys like Julian Assange and Bradley Manning, okay? I think this guy is just... I think we should erect monuments to him and parade his face on a flag down the street. Throw this guy a party. Let's have Edward Snowden Day. I was cracking a joke earlier. It's a shame he checked out of his Hong Kong hotel. I was trying to get people to pitch in and send him pizza and beer and a card of thank you. So, folks, any of you who may not have been near the news or telly or whatever, even if you have, you've been probably briefed a little bit on this story of this chap named Edward Snowden, 29 years old, who has come forth as a whistleblower, having formerly worked for the NSA, or as I call them, New World Order screwing us all. There are other names, no such agency, certainly more derogatory names you can develop with that acronym that I'm not going to repeat on the air. And we're going to talk a little bit about the history of the NSA, what they're up to today, and who some of their key players are. Folks, this is an intense story that really ties together so much of everything that I have been about since day one, everything that True, I believe, is trying to do. And, one of the most common denominators there is in the discussion of anything New World Order related, in essence, as far as the United States is concerned, and I'll parse through an argument that says, well, it's a lot bigger than that too. But you find the NSA quite involved in just about every facet, every tentacle of this octopus that I've been mentioning for so long. But before we begin, I'm going to read you the story, folks. I'm just going to kind of brief you on how we're going to spend our time today. And again, the phone lines are open. I would love it if anyone would comment and give your perspective on what's going on here. We have phone lines open. A landline is 208-935-0094. And there's also a toll-free number. It's 888-747-1968. Folks, you're listening to the Micro Effect. This is listener-supported radio. This is not Clear Channel. We do not have car and beer and phone companies advertising on here. And we really need your donations to survive and keep this freedom of speech alive on the airwaves. So do what you can, folks. Please go to themicroeffect.com, donate, and at the very least, subscribe to those archives. $20 a month. You get everything you pay for in the sense of being able to access every show all the time, no matter what your schedule is. Again, I am the guest host of a show that was started many, many years ago by Dr. A. Truott, PhD. His blog is atruott.com, atrueott.com. Not any others. There are no other sites that are his, other than his mineral supplement business, Mother Earth Minerals, at meminerals.com. So should you be confused in doing a search, seeing another site with a similar name to the one I previously mentioned here, rest assured it is a libelous, slanderous site aimed at attacking his credibility and character. And mine and a bunch of other people's too. Again, reference to those Bopsy twins I mentioned, and anyone familiar with this show will know exactly who I'm talking about. I am the author of a little blog over at labvirus.com. I'm also a musician, and I'm working on trying to release a record here, a compilation of everything I've pretty much done in my life so far. So stay tuned. That hopefully will be released soon. But meanwhile, you can listen to those songs. Many of them are available for free streaming playback right off the web there. And if you go to my site at labvirus.com, you'll see there's a button there that says Alex's Music. It'll take you right there. There's also a button there that says Get Jurisdictionary, and I strongly recommend anyone who has not gotten this basic fundamental education about how to operate yourself through superior courts, get this. Do yourself a favor and get this course from Dr. Fred Graves. It's again, money well spent. You become powerful tool in the legal process to defend and move forward your own issues in a pro se or pro per capacity. Okay, that's pretty much it for my announcements. Certainly, there are new things on the horizon with regard to this MERS virus, MERS. They're calling it SARS-like, and this H7N9. June 21st is an interesting date because a number of summer movies are being released on that very date. One of which is this World War Z with Brad Pitt, which I strongly suggest again is predictive programming coming out of Hollywood to get us ready for this incredible release of bioweapon power that they plan upon unleashing at the advent of this Armageddon thing that they're pushing so much toward, this BB 666 Netanyahu and all that's going down in Israel and Syria and so forth. But we will not be going there too much today. True, I'm just noticing, has a post of his own on this topic, and I strongly recommend. I have not read it, but I'm sure he's going to be hitting on a lot of the things I'll be talking about today. I'm going to read to you folks some other articles that were written by some other journalists and share with you the story as it unfolded. And a lot of this is for the benefit of some of the older listeners. I know that I have a great aunt, and she's up there in her years. And it's not practical for her to sit in front of a computer screen and read all this stuff. And it's much better if she hears it read aloud. So if only for her and her friends' benefit, I'm going to read to you again, folks, these articles as they came out over the weekend. And hopefully we can have a further discussion as to their relevance in the grand scope of things as far as where I've been going with all this since I first came on the air. Okay, I'll wait till later. So, how did this story begin? Well, we first learned of an insider, a whistleblower, saying that, oh yeah, the NSA, we hack everything. Everything everywhere. It's not just about metadata. And they were throwing out this saying, oh no, we're not listening to every phone call. We're just seeing how long and where and We're not recording the content. Rubbish. Absolute lies. of course they're recording the content. I could have told you that, folks, a long time ago. I had a friend who had another friend who worked at the NSA, and he sat on one of these backbones that sits on one of the, I guess the fiber op T1, T3, that sort of thing. And he's like, oh yeah, we split everything off, and it all goes into these things, and everything's recorded. Absolutely everything. So it then turns out, well, this guy has chosen to reveal himself. And in doing so, he went to this Guardian newspaper in the UK, gave certain journalists an interview. And I'm going to read to you folks the initial article that I found, and this is from ZeroHedge.com. And folks, if you're not unfamiliar with that website, it's a little avant-garde. It's very, very different. There's an interesting group of people there commenting and reading and posting. But this is a very advanced forum for discussion of financial matters and others that relate to, our well-being in general. It's kind of centered around the film Fight Club, which gives its thematic presence known in the tagline in their title, which is, on a long enough timeline, their survival rate for everyone drops to zero. Hence the name Zero Hedge. So the guy who controls the editorial content goes by the name of Tyler Durden, Tyler being the main character in the film. Tyler posted this 2 days ago. The U.S. government will be happy to learn it will save several $1 million on the criminal inquiry into the identity of the NSA's PRISM whistleblower. Because moments ago, in a lengthy profile by The Guardian's Glenn Greenwald, said whistleblower has decided to reveal himself to the world. He is Edward Snowden, 29 years old, originally from Elizabeth City, North Carolina, a Maryland Community College dropout and former Special Forces trainee. The 10-year veteran with the NSA, most recently in its Hawaii office under the employ of defense contractor Booz Allen Hamilton, has just made history and joined the pantheon of such legendary whistleblowers of the U.S. government's secret activities as the Pentagon Papers' Daniel Ellsberg and WikiLeaks' Bradley Manning. Last but not least, Edward is currently residing in Hong Kong out of harm's, read America's, way. And folks, just the latest news, he's no longer there. He checked out. I've heard some rumors he's perhaps seeking asylum in Iceland. Maybe he's doing the Ecuador thing along with who knows what he's up to. I hope he's safe, and I hope wherever he gets to, we can still buy him some pizza and beer. I just can't. I can't commend this guy's bravery enough. This is what a real patriot looks like, folks. So, who is Edward? How did he end up at the NSA? The Guardian has the full story, and these are quotes now from The Guardian. By his own admission, he was not a stellar student. In order to get the credits necessary to obtain a high school diploma, he attended a community college in Maryland, studying computing, but never completed the coursework. In 2003, he enlisted in the U.S. Army and began a training program to join the Special Forces. Invoking the same principles that he now cites to justify his leaks, he said, quote, "I wanted to fight in the Iraq War because I felt like I had an obligation as a human being to help free people from oppression," unquote. He recounted how his beliefs about the war's purpose were quickly dispelled. Quote, "Most of the people training us seem pumped up about killing Arabs, not helping anyone," unquote, he said. After he broke both his legs in a training accident, he was discharged. After that, he got his first job in an NSA facility working as a security guard for one of the agency's covert facilities at the University of Maryland. From there, he went to the CIA, where he worked on IT security. His understanding of the internet and his talent for computer programming enabled him to rise fairly quickly for someone who lacked even a high school diploma. By 2007, the CIA stationed him with diplomatic cover in Geneva, Switzerland. His responsibility for maintaining computer network security meant he had clearance to access a wide array of classified documents. That access, along with almost 3 years he spent around CIA officers, led him to begin seriously questioning the rightness of what he saw. He described as formative an incident in which he claimed CIA operatives were attempting to recruit a Swiss banker to obtain secret banking information. Snowden said that they achieved this by purposely getting the banker drunk and encouraging him to drive home in his car. When the banker was arrested for drunk driving, the undercover agent seeking to befriend him offered to help, and a bond was formed that led to successful recruitment. Quote, much of what I saw in Geneva really disillusioned me about how my government functions and what its impact is in the world, unquote, he says. Quote, I realized I was part of something that was doing far more harm than good, unquote. He left the CIA in 2009 in order to take his first job working for a private contractor that assigned him to a functioning NSA facility stationed on a military base in Japan. It was then that he said, he watched Obama advance the very policies that I thought would be reined in, quote unquote. And as a result, I got hardened. Why did he wait so long? He said it was during the CIA stint in Geneva that he thought for the first time about exposing government secrets, but at the time he chose not for 2 reasons. First, he said, quote, most of the secrets the CIA has are about people, not machines and systems, so I didn't feel comfortable with disclosures that I thought could endanger anyone, unquote. Secondly, the election of Barack Obama in 2008 gave him hope that there would be real reforms, rendering disclosures unnecessary. That didn't happen. So he proceeded to reveal what he knows about the NSA to a newspaper, which the NYT pejoratively refers to as a quote-unquote British news site. Well, he certainly did not go with any of the news sites on favorable terms with the current administration. Instead, quote, he purposefully chose, he said, to give the documents to journalists whose judgment he trusted about what should be public and what should remain concealed, unquote. Which, of course, brings up the question, now what? And why risk what was otherwise a comfortable life in a Hawaiian paradise? In a note accompanying, now we're back to the Guardian article, folks. In a note accompanying the first set of documents he provided, he wrote, quote, I understand that I will be made to suffer for my actions, unquote. But I will be satisfied if the federation of secret law, unequal pardon, and irresistible executive powers that rule the world that I love are revealed even for an instant, unquote. Despite his determination to be publicly unveiled, he repeatedly insisted that he wants to avoid the media spotlight. Quote, I don't want public attention because I don't want the story to be about me. I want it to be about what the U.S. government is doing, unquote. He does not fear the consequences of going public, he said, only that doing so will distract attention from the issues raised by his disclosures. Quote, I know the media likes to personalize political debates, and I know the government will demonize me, unquote. And ain't that true, folks? If you've heard, Dianne Feinstein and folks, they're just saying he's treasonous. We're an all-out manhunt. Da, 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 da. That's all the news is painting this guy like the biggest traitor in the world. I beg to differ. I call this guy one of the greatest patriots we've had in a long time. Back to the article. The Guardian quotes, despite these fears, he remained hopeful his outing will not divert attention from the substance of his disclosures. Quote, I really want the focus to be on these documents and the debate which I hope this will trigger among citizens around the globe about what kind of world we want to live in, unquote. He added, quote, my sole motive is to inform the public as to that which is done in their name and that which is done against them, unquote. He's had a very comfortable life that included a salary of roughly $200,000, a girlfriend with whom he shared a home in Hawaii, a stable career, and a family he loves. Quote, I'm willing to sacrifice all of that because I can't in good conscience allow the U.S. government to destroy privacy, internet freedom, and basic liberties for people around the world with this massive surveillance machine they're secretly building, unquote. That said, he's left the U.S. and is now in Hong Kong, which in the new normal is a safer venue for those exposing what, until recently, was considered a massive conspiracy theory. Guardian quotes, 3 weeks ago, Snowden made final preparations that resulted in last week's series of blockbuster news stories. At the NSA office in Hawaii where he was working, he copied the last set of documents he intended to disclose. He then advised his NSA supervisor he needed to be away from work for a couple of weeks in order to receive treatment for epilepsy, a condition he learned he suffers from after a series of seizures last year. As he packed his bags, he told his girlfriend that he had to be away for a few weeks, though he said he was vague about the reason. Quote, that's not an uncommon occurrence for someone who has spent the last decade working in the intelligence world, unquote. On May 20th, he boarded a flight to Hong Kong where he's remained ever since. He chose the city because, quote, they have a spirited commitment to free speech and the right of political dissent, unquote, and because he believed that it was one of the few places in the world that could both and would resist the dictates of the U.S. government. Specifically extradition. That's my own comment. Snowden's future is bleak to say the least, and if Bradley Manning's recent travails are any indication, a life in prison may be an upside option. Now, and I'm just going to skip over the quotes on that part. Now the great debate begins. Is sacrificing it all in the name of ethical principles under a totalitarian regime now fully set on destroying you worth it? And since we're dealing with one grand revealed conspiracy, another one will naturally emerge. Is Snowden's explanation of his motives honest and accurate? Why now, and why him? Surely at least one other person has worked at the NSA in the past decade whose thought process has been identical and who put the value of democracy over and above that of one's personal career development and safety. Most importantly, the ball is now in Slick Barry's court. You can call him Obama. I'm not going to. And the constitutional scholars' every action will be studied under a microscope by civil liberty defenders, both real and paid for, everywhere, while one John Corzine withdraws millions of dollars from East Hampton ATM machines unhindered and without any scruples. Finally, we would like to thank Snowden for putting a nail into the coffin of all those who use the term conspiracy theorist pejoratively. Because whatever his motives, whatever the outcome of this dramatic escalation between the people's right to know and a government intent on hijacking all civil liberties one by one, Snowden has showed that the distance from conspiracy theory to conspiracy fact is just one ethical judgment away. And then they present the full text of the U.S.-Hong Kong extradition treaty and a link to the actual Guardian filmed interview with Edward Snowden. And I strongly recommend you folks check that out if you have not already. You can go, again, to the zerohedge.com website and look up the article I just read to you entitled NSA Whistleblower Reveals Himself. We're going to go to the break in the minute, folks, and when we come back, I'm going to read to you some more stuff on where this story has gone since its first breaking on Saturday. Pretty much happened late Friday or early Saturday is when all this stuff began coming to the surface. We're going to learn about what the NSA is currently up to, this giant machine that he just referred to. Well, pieces of it are definitely being built, and the question remains, why? If they're already gathering all the information they need to with regard to getting all in available data, right? They have this thing they started and achieved called TIA, or Total Information Awareness. And by all reports, they achieved that goal quite some time ago. And yet still, they're building these massive things. What for? Well, we're going to hear the government's explanation, and then we're going to hear some other ideas about what those things are really for. We're going to learn about some of the key players within the NSA. In particular, I'm going to highlight and mention a few things about former Lieutenant Colonel Michael A. Aquino, who is a critical player in this group and has been partaking in satanic rituals and ceremonies and advocating the proliferation of Satanism within the armed forces intelligence community for decades. So when we get back from the break, folks, we're going to go down the rabbit hole a little bit further in those areas. And then we will talk about Israel again a little bit with regard to how it fits into this whole picture. And we're going to learn how the ACLU is handling all this. Folks, if you, again, have been following this story, folks like Dianne Feinstein, head of the Senate Intelligence Committee, she's calling for blood. She's saying this guy is guilty of treason. Never mind the fact that we have been illegally wiretapping and recording everything about everyone for years. Never mind all that. Never mind that I, Dianne Feinstein, personally saw to the moving forward of these completely illegal programs. No, never mind any of that. No, this guy's guilty because he exposed us. He's the bad one. You know, you folks remember the case about the butler up at the Vatican, right? He exposed the Pope's shenanigans. You know, quickly the news covered up anything that was discovered. You know, certainly none of those facts were talked about in any of the stories. No, the focus was all about the butler and his violating the Vatican's, the Pope's privacy. Okay, I guess we're not going to break. So I'm going to go ahead and start reading you folks this next piece of journalistic brilliance. And this one is also from our friend Tyler Durden. And it goes a little further down the rabbit hole. It's pretty well written. I have a few comments. There are a couple of other things that could be mentioned, but thankfully I've got another little piece here that will hopefully fill in some of those blanks as well. This one is called From 9/11 to Prism Gate: How the Carlyle Group LBO'd the World's Secrets. Now, folks, what we need to understand here, just before I begin, is that our boy Edward Snowden had been working for Booz Allen Hamilton for just a few weeks, just a few months. And Booz Allen Hamilton is largely owned by the Carlyle Group. Who are the Carlyle Group? Well, any real investigator into 9/11 has found out plenty about the Carlyle Group. They are a consortium of it's in a capital investing sort of umbrella company that has its large ownership in Halliburton, and big constructing, military defense constructing firms like that. And who is on their board? Well, the Bush family and the Bin Laden family, just to name a few. So just a little preface there, getting into this. The short but profitable tale of how 483,000 private individuals have top-secret access to the nation's most non-public information begins in 2001. Quote, after 9/11, Intelligence budgets were increased. New people needed to be hired. It was a lot easier to go to the private sector and get people off the shelf, unquote. And sure enough, firms like Booz Allen Hamilton, still two-thirds owned by the deeply tied to international government's investment firm, the Carlyle Group, took full advantage of Congress's desire to shrink federal agencies and their budgets by enabling outside consultants, already primed with their $4,000 cost security clearances, to fulfill the needs of an ever more encroaching on privacy administration. Booz Allen and other security consultant providing firms trade publicly with a cloak of admitted opacity due to the secrecy of their government contracts. You may not have important information concerning our business, which will limit your insight into a substantial portion of our business. But the actions of Dianne Feinstein, who promptly denounced treasonous Edward Snowden, have muddied the waters for the stunning 1.1 million, or 21% of the total, private consultants with access to confidential and secret government information. Perhaps the situation of gross government overspend and under-oversight is summed up best. Quote, "It's very difficult to know what contractors are doing and what they are billing for the work, or even whether they should be performing the work at all," unquote. First, let's hear Dianne Feinstein's take on it all. Quote, "I don't look at this as being a whistleblower. I think it's an act of treason," the chairwoman of the Senate Intelligence Committee told reporters. The California lawmaker went on to say that Snowden had violated his oath to defend the Constitution. Quote, "He violated the oath. He violated the law. It's treason," unquote. So how did all this get started? And this is by way of the AP. The reliance on contractors for intelligence work ballooned after the 9/11 attacks. The government scrambled to improve and expand its ability to monitor the communication and movement of people who might threaten another attack. Quote, "After 9/11, intelligence budgets were increased. New people needed to be hired," Augustin said. "It was a lot easier to go to the private sector and get people off the shelf," unquote. The reliance on the private sector has grown since then, in part because of Congress's efforts to limit the size of federal agencies and shrink the budget, which has led to what appears to be major problems. But critics say reliance on contractors hasn't reduced the amount the government spends on defense, intelligence, or other programs. Rather, they say it's just shifted work to private employers and reduced transparency. It becomes harder to track the work of those employees and determine whether they should all have access to government secrets. Quote, "It's very difficult to know what contractors are doing and what they are billing for the work, or even whether they should be performing the work at all," unquote. And now to the current Prismgate whistleblowing situation. Of the 4.9 million people with clearance to access confidential and secret government information, 1.1 million, or 21%, work for outside contractors, according to a report from Clapper's office. Of the 1.4 million who have the higher top secret access, 483,000, or 34%, work for contractors. Because clearances can take months or even years to acquire, government contractors often recruit workers who already have them. And why not? It's lucrative. Snowden says he accessed and downloaded the last of the documents that detailed the NSA surveillance program while working in an NSA office in Hawaii for Booz Allen, where he says he was earning $200,000 a year. Analysts caution that any of the 1.4 million people with access to the nation's top secrets could have leaked information about the program, whether they worked for a contractor or the government, for individuals and firms alike. Booz Allen has long navigated those waters well. The firm was founded in 1914, began serving the U.S. government in 1940, helping the Navy prepare for World War II. In 2008, it spun off the part of the firm that worked with private companies and abroad. That firm, called Booz & Co., is held privately. Booz Allen was then acquired by the Carlyle Group, an investment firm with its own deep ties to the government. In 2010, November, Booz Allen went public. Carlyle Group still owns 2/3 of the company's share, or a full majority stake. Curiously, once public, the Booz Allens of the world still operate like a pseudo-private company with extensive confidential cloaks, preventing the full disclosure of financial data. But don't worry, we should just trust them. And now from Bloomberg's Jonathan Weil. Psst, here's a stock tip for you. There's a company near Washington with strong ties to the U.S. intelligence community that has been around for almost a century and has secret ways of making money. So secret that the company can't tell you what they are. Investors who buy just need to have faith. To skeptics, this might seem like a pitch for an investment scam, but as anyone who's been paying attention to the news might have guessed, the company is Booz Allen Hamilton Holding Corporation. Quote, because we are limited in our ability to provide information about these contracts and services, the company said in its latest annual report, you may not have important information concerning our business, which will limit your insight into a substantial portion of our business, and therefore may be less able to fully evaluate the risks related to that portion of our business, unquote. Seems like it would be a dream arrangement for some corporations. Not only is Booz Allen allowed to keep investors uninformed, it's required to. I suppose we should give the company credit for being transparent about how opaque it is. While the media and popular attention is currently focused on who, if anyone else, may be the next Snowden struck by a sudden pang of conscience, perhaps a better question is what P.E. behemoth Carlyle, with a gargantuan $170 billion in AUM, knows, and why it rushed to purchase Booz Allen in the months after the Bear Stearns collapse, just when everyone else was batting down the hatches ahead of the biggest financial crash in modern history. Here's from Bloomberg in 2008. Carlyle Group, private equity fund run by David Rubenstein, agrees to acquire Booz Allen Hamilton's U.S. government consulting business for $2.54 billion. Biggest buyout since the credit markets collapsed in July. In addition to the UAE, who can possibly forget Carlyle's Saudi connection? Okay, here's from Wall Street Journal around 2001. If the U.S. boosts defense spending in its quest to stop Osama bin Laden's alleged terrorist activities, there may be one unexpected beneficiary, Mr. bin Laden's family. Among its far-flung business interests, the well-heeled Saudi Arabian clan, which says it is estranged from Osama, is an investor in a fund established by Carlyle Group, a well-connected Washington merchant bank specializing in buyouts of defense and aerospace companies. Through this investment and its ties to Saudi royalty, the bin Laden family has become acquainted with some of the biggest names in the Republican Party in recent years. Former President Bush, ex-Secretary of State James Baker, and ex-Secretary of Defense Frank Carlucci have made the pilgrimage to the bin Laden's family's headquarters in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. Mr. Bush makes speeches on behalf of Carlyle Group and is senior advisor to its Asian Partners Fund, while Mr. Baker is its senior counselor. Mr. Carlucci is the group's chairman. If there were any company closely connected to the U.S. and its presence in Saudi Arabia, it's the Saudi bin Laden Group, says Charles Freeman, president of the Middle East Policy Council. They're the establishment that Osama's trying to overthrow. As one can imagine, the rabbit hole just gets deeper and deeper the more one digs. For now, we'll let everyone do their own diligence. The results are fascinating. Going back to the topic at hand, we will, however, just ask how much and what kind of confidential, classified, and or top-secret information is shared behind Chinese walls between a Carlyle, still majority-owned company, and the private equity behemoth's employees and advisors, among which are some of the most prominent political and business luminaries currently alive. And then there's a list of both current and former employees of advisors. They've used Wiki, but anyone willing to do a search of over the 1,000 names is welcome to do so at their firm's website. And here's just some of, well, again, the Bushes are big up on there. Reagan, James Baker, Carlucci, Richard Darman, William Kennard, Arthur Levitt. You have a real rotating door between Capitol Hill and this group. Folks, for those who have done their research into 9/11, it's understood that the Carlyle Group benefited greatly. They shorted a lot. They benefited from the Reconstruction contracts. It's a very, very shady organization, and again, more traces to this nation state, this rogue nation state, which I spent last week talking about, and I will continue to talk until there is no breath left in me, about my my opposition to this rogue nation state of Israel, and the apartheid that is currently going on against Christianity, Christians, and Palestine. How does Israel fit into all of this? Well, I'm going to, again, so much of this research has already been done for me. All I had to do, really, folks, is just sort of collect who's done the best job of writing these things, because there are experts out there far more learned than I. It would be really a wasted effort, an exercise in futility, if I were to try to do my own original research on this. It'd be reinventing the wheel. There's so many people who've already done it. So all I can do, folks, really is collect what I think are the best examples and samples of other people's research and bring them up for consideration in the context of this discussion. And I said earlier, one common denominator in all these elements of this very satanic octopus, this agenda, shall we say, New World Order, whatever you want to call it, is the control exerted by this bloodline, this synagogue of Satan bloodline, in their efforts to disguise themselves as quote-unquote Jews, and to basically infiltrate and dominate all power structures on the world, including the control of and establishment of these central banks. Okay? Well, I'm not the only one who shares that view, and someone else is this guy, Jonas Alexis, and here's an article that he wrote called "Israel, and probably the Mossad in particular, is responsible for spying on millions of Americans." And it opens with a quote from George Orwell from the film 1984. "Big Brother is watching you," the caption said, while the dark eyes looked deep into Winston's own. It was the police patrol snooping into people's windows. The patrols did not matter, however. Only the thought police mattered. And here's the article by Jonas Alexis, and I will not get through it by the time we hit the break, but we're going to plod through this methodically, because this is important information, folks. Really, and I'm finding this again over at the Veterans Today website, published today. Neoconservative hawks never cease to amaze. Frank Gaffney of Front Page magazine wrote about 3 months ago. He put this graphic up And it says, Muslim Brotherhood infiltrates Obama administration. 6 American Islamist activists who work with the Obama administration are Muslim Brotherhood operatives who enjoy strong influence over U.S. policy. And you have listed there Arif Ali Khan, the Assistant Secretary for Policy Development for U.S. DHS. You have Mohammed El-Biari, who's Homeland Security Advisor. Rashad Hussain, Special Envoy to the Organization of the Islamic Conference, or OIC. A guy named Salam al-Marayati. He's an advisor to Obama, founder of the Muslim Public Affairs Council, and is its current executive director. There's a guy, Imam Mohammed Magid, Obama's Sharia czar, the Islamic Society of North America. Since when does Obama have a Sharia czar? Does anyone know what Sharia law is? I could spend an entire program just on that. Oh, that's just frustrating. Okay, another guy named Ibu Patel. He's a member of the Advisory Council on Faith-Based Neighborhood Partnerships. Okay. Now, in response to that, author of this article wishes us to look at the Jewish Brotherhood in the Obama administration. And this is coming directly from the Jewish Virtual Library. Okay, current staff members: Jack Lew, Secretary of the Treasury, replaced Geithner. David Plouffe, Senior Advisor to the President. Danielle Boren, Associate Director, Office of Public Engagement, Special Assistant to the Vice President. Gary Gensler, Chairman of the Community Futures Trading Commission. Dan Shapiro, Ambassador to Israel. Gene Sperling, Director of National Economic Council. Mary Shapiro, Chairwoman of the Securities and Exchange Commission. Stephen Simon, Head of the Middle East North Africa Desk at the National Security Council. And Eric Lynn, who's Middle East Policy Advisor. Past staff members include, of course, who can forget, current mayor of Chicago, Rahm Emanuel, former handler and by many accounts gay lover of Slick Berry in the White House. Rahm Emanuel, who from 2009 to 2010 was chief of staff to the president. David Axelrod, who was senior advisor to the president from 2009 to 11. And who can forget current Supreme Court Justice Elena Kagan, who in 2009 and 10 was Solicitor General of the United States. Peter Orszag, who in 9 and 10 was Director of the Office of Management and Budget. Lawrence Summers, Larry Summers, oh, he's our hero. He dismantled the Glass-Steagall Act. Isn't he our hero, folks? Lawrence Summers, Director of the National Economic Council. Mona Sutphin, who in 2009 through 11 was Deputy White House Chief of Staff. James Steinberg, from 2009 to 11, was Deputy Secretary of State. Dennis Ross, from 2009 to 11, was Special Assistant to the President, Senior Director for the Central Region to the Secretary of State. Ronald Klain was Chief of Staff to the VP. Jared Bernstein was Chief Economist and Economic Policy Advisor to the VP. Susan Scher was Chief of Staff to the First Lady. Since when does the First Lady get a Chief of Staff? Since when does she get a staff? Ay, 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 folks. Okay, I'm just almost at the end of this. Lee Feinstein, in 2009, was Campaign Foreign Policy Advisor. Okay, Mara Rudman was their Foreign Policy Advisor for the president. Okay? This list did not include other Jews such as Lois Lerner, Jacob Lew, Douglas Shulman of the IRS. How about Michael Chertoff of Homeland Security? I got more bad news for Gaffney. During Obama's first term, Elizabeth Drew of the New York Times Review of Books reported that Rahm Emanuel, David Axelrod, and others were running the White House, quote unquote. Alan Dershowitz himself stated then, quote, Obama is surrounded by Jewish advisors who understand how Israel works and even has a senior advisor with an Israeli background, unquote. Right before Obama ascended to the throne for the second time in 2013, Dershowitz wrote in the Jerusalem Post that Jews like himself, quote, must now realize that our support for the president will be good for Israel over the next 4 years. Jews vote for both parties. Nobody is ignoring us. Every rational candidate knows that they and their party must earn our votes in every election, unquote. Dershowitz then declared something that we would have been a shock to the founding fathers. Quote, most Americans, regardless of religion, are united in support of Israel's security, but divided about social and economic issues. It is critically important that support for Israel's security remain a bipartisan issue and never becomes a wedge issue that divides voters along party lines, as it has in some European countries, unquote. In other words, even though the economy is a dismal failure both in Europe and in America, even though millions of Americans are out of work, even though cities like Detroit have been leveled to near economic ruin, even though this generation has been, quote-unquote, hobbled by the soaring cost of college, even though people are being cheated out of their pensions and retirement plans, even though precious soldiers who fought Israel's wars in the Middle East have been cheated out of their pensions by predators, to use the New York Times' own words, Americans must support Israel. One particular student, Ken Ilgunas, actually sleeps in a van to escape loan debt. He laments, after many job rejections, quote, I had this huge $32,000 student debt, and at the time I was pushing carts at Home Depot making $8 an hour. I was just getting kind of frantic, unquote. Last March, the Washington Times put out an article entitled Drone Industry Predicts Explosive Economic Boost. Similarly, the Seattle Times declared in 2009, Boeing drone maker creates technology jobs near Gorge. In March of this year, it was reported that the U.S. drone economy will create 100,000 jobs. In other words, you got a huge college debt and want a job? You've got to learn how to kill Muslims. You've got to be in the Zionist matrix. As the 29-year-old former CIA computer technician Edward Joseph Snowden has recently declared, quote, most of the people training us seemed pumped up about killing Arabs, not helping anyone, unquote. Moreover, the IRS continued to cheat the average American who's trying to put food on the table. Quote, the IRS can't find the receipts from a $4 million agency conference in 2010, meaning it can't provide the same documentation for business-related travel it requires Americans to include on tax filings, unquote. In addition, veterans who've been disabled due to the war are finding that it's very hard to get their disability benefit. There were at least 600,000 of those cases this past spring. Despite all of that, quote-unquote, born-again neocon, President Obama has been unconditionally supporting Israel both financially and militarily. The Jewish Telegraphic Agency even titled an article, Welcome to Obama's Jewish America. Likewise, the front cover of New York Magazine declared in 2008 the first Jewish president. Jacob Heilbrunn himself declared, quote, whether they praise or denounce Obama, the neocons are winning. He ends up catering to them, unquote. Consider this. 1 week after the State of the Union address, Obama, quote, sent his fiscal year 2011 budget request to Congress, which included a record-breaking $3 billion in military aid to Israel, unquote. More recently, it was reported by the Washington Post that Obama will pick, quote, Bruce Hyman, a Goldman Sachs partner in the Windy City, unquote, as U.S. ambassador to Canada. Quote, Heyman runs a private wealth fund at Goldman Sachs. He would replace David Jacobson, who's also from Chicago, unquote. In 2009, Rabbi David Saperstein, became part of Obama's Council for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnership. Saperstein's wife, Ellen Weiss, is a former National Public Radio vice president, or as I call him, New World Order propaganda radio. The Washington Post calls Saperstein the quintessential religious lobbyist on Capitol Hill. Back in 2008, a very small number of people launched the Rabbis for Obama movement in order to attract Jewish individuals to vote for Obama. Rabbi Kapers Funi, the chief rabbi of the Beth Shalom B'nai Zaken Ethiopian Hebrew congregation in southwest Chicago, is Michelle Obama's cousin. Israeli Rabbi Ovadia Yosef declared that Obama is a, quote, kind of king of our time, unquote. As such, the president continues, the good rabbi can declare war on an enemy state and has the authority to pardon those sentenced to death. Keep in mind that it was Yosef who declared in 2010 that the, quote, Goyim were born only to serve us. Without that, they have no place in the world, only to serve the people of Israel. In Israel, death has no dominion over them. With Gentiles, it will be like any person. They need to die, but God will give them longevity. Why are Gentiles needed? They will work, they will plow, they will reap. We will sit like an effendi and eat. That is why Gentiles were created, unquote. Israel Shahak and Norton Mavinsky write that Yosef believes that, quote, Jews killing non-Jews does not constitute murder, according to the Jewish religion, and that killing of innocent Arabs for reason of revenge is a Jewish virtue, unquote. In other words, according to this principle, Gentiles have to prostrate before the cross of Jewish ideology in order to survive. And this Jewish ideology seems to replace the cross of Calvary. Susan Rice is a recent and classic example. Right before she was appointed as National Security Advisor, she went online and tweeted, quote, on my way to AIPAC's dinner in NYC. Looking forward to speaking about U.S. commitment to hashtag Israel. Spanning generations. No, I'm not hearing the breaks. I guess we went to break. I didn't even hear it. Sorry, folks. I have no confirmation in my headphones that we even went to break, so I have no idea where I am in this article. Okay, so they're saying I'm back on. Okay. Well, folks, I guess we just came back from break. Don't know what time we left, but I'm reading to you folks this article from Veterans Today. And we're talking about Israel. And this is an article by a guy named Jonas E. Alexis. And I'm just going to kind of keep going where I left off. Apparently, we went out for a couple minutes and we came back, and I was just sort of still reading. So that's the way it is. All right. So Susan Rice, looking forward to speaking about U.S. commitment to Israel, spanning generations and political parties. Power has already taken a hawkish position on perpetual wars in the Middle East. So what is really Gaffney's point? What is he implanting into his readers' minds? If he's inciting his readers to revolt against the Muslim Brotherhood in the White House, then should he do the same thing with the modern Sanhedrin that always tells U.S. presidents what to do in the Middle East? Should he do the same thing with AIPAC, an organization that has been a fifth column in the U.S. since its inception? Gaffney probably did not know that it was Bill Kristol who declared that Obama is a born-again neocon, meaning that our president is following same old Jewish bloodbath in the Middle East. Right after our beloved president received his Zionist baptism, he began to push the envelope even more by monitoring millions of Americans and invading their privacy through their emails and cell phone messages. This has been going on for nearly 6 years through companies such as Google, Facebook, and most recently, Apple. Google CEO Larry Page, Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg deny that they had any knowledge of the black operation, despite the fact those companies knew the government was implementing a secret surveillance program. The New York Times, however, declares, quote, "The companies that negotiated with the government include Google, which owns YouTube, Microsoft, which owns Hotmail and Skype, Yahoo, Facebook, AOL, Apple, and Paltalk," according to one of the people briefed on the discussions. Obama calls those invasions, quote, "modest encroachments on privacy, a critical tool, a right balance, and a legal one at that." Contrast that to the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution, quoted, "The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue, but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized." Then the president drops this laughable statement, quote, "and the modest encroachments on privacy that are involved in getting phone numbers or duration of calls without a name attached and without looking at content that on net it was worth us doing," unquote. One need not be an intellectual to see that this is generally dumb. How can you monitor people's phone calls and conversations without a name attached and without looking at content? If they are allegedly looking for terrorists, how are they going to identify the individual in question without a name attached? The president continued to say that nobody is listening to your phone calls, unquote. The president is implicitly saying the U.S. government is using your tax money to monitor phone conversations. And this happens daily, but no one is listening to your conversations. How can he maintain such an obvious contradiction in public while his head does not explode? His pants are on fire, folks. Our beloved president is a lawyer, and he certainly has the critical tool to recognize an obvious contradiction. In fact, when he was a senator, Obama opposed provisions granting retroactive immunity to telecommunications companies that shared private client information with the government. But the Zionist matrix does not allow him to think straight. There's more. Quote, "If the intelligence community then actually wants to listen to a phone call, they've got to go back to a federal judge just like they would in a criminal investigation," unquote. They've already broken the law by invading people's privacy. So why would they want to go back to a federal judge when they can do virtually whatever they please? The Senate Intelligence Chairman, Dianne Feinstein, of course, declared that monitoring phone conversations is lawful. But she had one nagging problem. She could not tell us where in the Constitution it states that invading people's privacy is lawful. Not only that, Feinstein wanted to punish whoever made the secret public. And that person would be Edward Snowden. Snowden himself has already foreseen his fate. Quote, "I will be made to suffer for my actions," unquote. Folks, I'm just going to pause here and insert a little comment that is my understanding that as far as laws go and the congressional procedure, big picture, unless they are specifically stated as to be included in a law, by their not being mentioned at all, they are by default exempt from all laws. Which is to say, unless a law specifically states it includes the NSA, it does not apply to them. So, how many laws do you know that specifically include the NSA? I can't tell you one of them, folks. Okay, going back to this Veterans Today article on Israel spying on Americans. Under born-again neocon Obama, we now have a fully established police state where the NSA now monitors huge volumes of records of domestic emails and internet searches, as well as bank transfers, credit card transactions, travel and telephone records. The U.S. is already preparing charges against Snowden. Jody Westby of Forbes writes on that June 6, 2016 will go down in history as the day America found Big Brother in big data. Obama himself declares that the age of 100% privacy is over. It's important to recognize, quote, that you can't have 100% security, then also have 100% privacy and zero inconvenience. We're going to have to make some choices as a society. Glenn Greenwald and Ewan MacAskill of the British newspaper The Guardian go even further to say that offensive cyber capabilities have already been taken in place in order to advance U.S. objectives around the world. This is congruent with Zionism's world domination, and it is safe to say that our born-again neocon president is more aggressive than Bush, particularly on domestic policy. This has recently stunned the Associated Press. And they put an article out called Israeli Companies with NSA and Perhaps the Mossad Monitor Millions of Americans Daily. The million-dollar question is this: were Israeli companies involved in collecting U.S. communications? According to the Israeli newspaper Haaretz, the answer is a resounding yes. Haaretz declares, quote, 2 Israeli companies conduct bugging and wiretapping for the NSA. Erint, E-R-I-N-T, which took over its parent company, Comverse Technology, C-O-M-V-E-R-S-E, earlier this year, is responsible for tapping the communication lines of the American telephone giant Verizon, according to a past Verizon employee cited by James Bamford in a Wired article, Wired magazine. Verint, V-E-R-I-N-T. No, V's missing from that. Okay, neither Verint or Verizon commented on that matter. Well, I have always long held, folks, that anything very, V-E-R-I, is Mossad. I've said it before, I'll say it again. If it's got very in the title, it's very Mossad. Okay, continuing on with the Haaretz article, quote, Natus, N-A-T-U-S, which was acquired in 2010 by the American company Boeing, supplied the software and hardware used at AT&T wiretapping rooms, according to whistleblower Mark Klein, who revealed the information in 2004. Klein, a past technician at AT&T, who filed a suit against the company for spying its customers, revealed a secret room in the company's San Francisco office where the NSA collected data on American citizens' telephone calls and internet surfing. Both Verint and Natus have ties to the Israeli intelligence agency and the Israel Defense Forces Intelligence Gathering Unit 8200. Given the close ties between U.S. and Israeli intelligence, the question arises as to whether Israeli intelligence, including Mossad, was party to the secret. And folks, I've seen these NSA backbone offices. The AT&T has one right over here on Geary, in between Arguello and 2nd Avenue in San Francisco. It's a modest-looking, innocuous storefront with no sign on it, a door that you can't open, and a little video camera looking at you. Address. And it's just, you look through the window, and it's just this tiny little desk in a front room of an office, but you can't see what's behind it. There's a wall. And I saw this thing being built. There's banks and banks of computers and fiber optic equipment going through there. And my understanding is that this is one of just bazillions of these things. You've got one in your town, folks. Trust me. Everything going on the internet is copied and diverted and routed into these NSA servers and recorded. Everything. Phone, radio, data, whatever it is. It's just a lot easier for them to just copy it all and store it all and have the computers analyze it than do it any other way. And primarily it was the efficiency which drove that model, strangely enough. So I'm understanding. Getting back to this article, the newspaper says, Harrods says that the secret programs, quote, sweep up an estimated 3 billion phone calls a day, unquote. This evidence is corroborated by Michael Kelly of Business Insider. According to whistleblower and computer engineer Mark Klein, NSA, quote, vacuumed up internet and phone call data from ordinary Americans with the cooperation of AT&T, unquote. Kelly said that, quote, one of the founders of Verint, Jacob Kobe Alexander, is a former Israeli intelligence officer, unquote. And here's the interesting news, quote, a co-founder and former chairman of NARIS, Ori Cohen, told Fortune magazine in 2001 that his partners have done technology work for Israeli intelligence, unquote. Back in 2011, quote, another former chief of Unit 8200 acknowledged to the Israeli paper Haaretz that high-tech firms around the world employ both Unit 8200 equipment and its veteran personnel, unquote. Israel, not Iran, is the West's primary enemy. No country in the entire history of America has ever been able to monitor millions upon millions of American citizens until now. In other words, what we are seeing here is that the Zionist machine in Israel is the most dangerous regime in recent memory. The West's primary enemy is not Iran or Russia or even North Korea. The West's primary enemy is the country that can send missiles to any city in the West at any time. And that country is Israel. Lest you say that this is pure speculation, 28-year-old CIA veteran Paul R. Pillar said just that a few weeks ago. That particular country, with its spiritual decadence and decades of Palestinian carnage, has been theologically called the synagogue of Satan. That synagogue has produced Jewish revolutionary cells over the centuries. And over time, these revolutionaries, with the help of Ministry of Propaganda called Hollywood, spread their Zionist wings all over the world. It cannot be emphasized enough that the synagogue is powerful and is based on a massive lie and deceit. The recent Zionist regime in Israel, and even America, is part of that manifestation. Jewish revolutionary cells began to persecute Christians in the first century, and the people who were part of those revolutionary movements were, and still are, contrary to all men, unquote, from 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 14. Some translations say they work against all humanity, or they oppose all mankind, or they are hostile to everyone. Only 2 newspapers have reported that Israel was behind the scene, the Haaretz and Business Insider. Imagine the reaction if Iran happens to monitor just one state in the United States. The neoconservative hawks would quickly summon hundreds of fictitious arguments as to why the U.S. ought to bomb Iran. Obama and Bush, 2 sides of the same coin. Top CIA lawyer John Rizzo declared in 2011 that Obama continued to support Bush's policies. Quote, with a notable exception of the enhanced interrogation program, unquote, Rizzo noted then, the Obama administration, quote, changed virtually nothing with respect to existing CIA programs and operations. Things continued. Authorities were continued that were originally granted by President Bush beginning shortly after 9/11. Those were all picked up, reviewed, and endorsed by the Obama administration. And as a side note, folks, just absolutely contrary 180 to his campaign promises. Remember that? Obama promised to shut down Guantanamo during his presidential campaign, but this has yet to happen. Instead, it has been reported that detainees are undergoing genital searches. By 2009, 2010, Bush and Obama were so ideologically intertwined that the Washington Post, the Village Voice, and other media outlets put out articles entitled George W. Obama. Monitoring phone conversations started under the Bush administration. Sometimes law enforcement uses these forms of tracking devices with little or no court oversight, documents show. FBI is known to have broken the law and invaded U.S. citizens' privacy for years. From the Washington Post in 2010, quote, the FBI illegally collected more than 2,000 U.S. telephone call records between 2002 and 2006 by invoking terrorism emergencies that did not exist or simply persuading phone companies to provide records, according to internal Bureau memo and interviews. FBI officials issued approvals after the fact to justify their actions. Emails obtained by the Washington Post detail how counterterrorism officials inside FBI headquarters did not follow their own procedures that were put in place to protect civil liberties. The stream of urgent requests for phone records also overwhelmed the FBI Communications Analysis Unit with work that ultimately was not connected to imminent threats. We know very well that every United States president has to pass the Israel test, otherwise he simply will not make it. Even people who do not want to admit there is a Jewish influence in virtually everything that pertains to culture and politics ends up admitting just that. Joe Biden himself wrote a few days ago, quote, I bet you 85% of those changes, whether it's in Hollywood or social media, are a consequence of Jewish leaders in the industry, unquote. Abraham Foxman is defending Muslim baiting. And that's an interview with Abraham Foxman that I'm just not going to read. We're going to continue on. And for good reason. There's some words in there that are not suitable for the air. This guy apparently is real class in the choice of words that he uses, folks. But again, where is this story going to land? Time can only tell. Right now, this Edward Snowden character, God protect him and let's all say a prayer for his well-being and safety, because he has stuck his neck out in a way unlike very few before him. And again, we're talking in the likes of Assange, Manning, my uncle, people who really took the heat for the price of unveiling truth. And this is truth that we've all known about. We're now learning some more gory details. Folks, I'm going to pause for a minute and just kind of segue into one of those characters who is part of this group, this no such agency. True did a post on this a while ago. It's at some point in our research, it became known that by typing in the word Illuminati backwards, .com, in other words, Itanimulli, right, ITANIMULLI.com, if you type that into your web browser, it takes you straight to the NSA website. Now, I don't know if the NSA did that or just some dude did it as a joke. Who knows the real story there? But that's the truth. If you type in Itanimulli.com, it takes you to the NSA website. So there's this guy who is very closely involved with the NSA. Marshall Thomas calls him a general, and the NSA general. I know, folks. The NSAs don't really have generals in their ranks, or do they? Who knows what really goes on in the ranks and the halls of the NSA? All I know is he is not the only researcher to tie him to the NSA. Certainly, there's a lengthy chapter in the late Bill Cooper's book, Behold a Pale Horse, on this individual. My research has shown, and Marshall Thomas will be one of the guys to come out and tell you, that he worked closely with Ed Dames and fellow cohorts John B. Alexander and Bert Stubblebine to create this remote viewing school called SciTech, Psychotechnologies Incorporated. And in fact was one of the original Men Who Stare at Goats, as written of in the book by John Ronson. Well, I'm going to read you just a tiny little blurb, descriptive paragraph or two on Michael Aquino, so that you folks can get a little familiar with one of the key players in this group, the NSA. And it's under a heading called CIA Cults. And I think I read this to you folks a while back, but I'm just going to throw this back in. By the end of the break, we'll switch to something else. Intelligence agencies have infiltrated and created some satanic groups, with the resurgence of groups of this type beginning in 1966 with the birth of the Church of Satan, founded by Anton LaVey. LaVey studied criminology in SF and worked in the SFPD crime lab, also as an informant for Interpol. Prior to the Church of Satan, LaVey ran a group called the Magic Circle. His most famous associate is the NSA's General Michael Aquino. At the time of his membership in LaVey's group, Aquino was an Army specialist in intelligence and psychological warfare. In 1973, he became the executive officer of the 306th Psychological Operations Battalion, contemporary with his founding of the Church of Set, or the Temple of Set. General Michael Aquino wrote a paper called From PSYOP to Mind War, The Psychology of Victory. That thesis stated that enemy population could be subdued by inflicting a state of psychological terror and feelings of imminent destruction. He discusses the use of psychotronic weapons or electromagnetic weapons that influence the mind. Capitulation could be induced without firing a shot by extremely low frequency or ELF signals piggybacked on broadcasts of radio, TV, or microwave communications to influence and manipulate the thoughts and feelings of the target population. Pause for a minute, folks, and think about Camp Williams, Utah. This giant facility going up, one of many like it, as part of this new program of new facilities being built, this giant machine that Snowden spoke of. Okay, this thing that's being built, it's beyond need as far as TIA is concerned. They're already gathering up all the data they need. So what's this thing for? I'll continue to read. During the 1960s, Aquino was prominent in the Church of Satan and a close friend of Anton LaVey until he started his own Church of Set. And folks, that website is Xeper.org, Xeper.org. Beware, it's really a Satanist site. This is no joke. A police intelligence report dated July 1st of 1981 reads, quote, "The Church of Set is a group with hundreds of members that operates on a national level. Aquino is the official head of the organization, rules through a council of 9, who are in fact his lieutenants. At least 2 members of the Council of 9 at that time were members of Army intelligence. In the late 80s, Aquino was accused by SF police of being involved in a satanic child molestation ring centered on the daycare facility at the Presidio military base where Aquino was stationed at the time. Probable victims were numbered at 68. Many of them had contracted venereal disease. 22 families filed $66 million in claims against the Army, claiming that criminal charges against Aquino were dropped due to pressure from the Army. In other words, his high security clearance. Aquino admitted to renting the German castle where the Nazi SS was formed, and reenacting the secret ceremony that founded the Nazi SS among fellow spooks decked out in full Nazi regalia. It's important to note that Michael Aquino is first and foremost a military intelligence officer with over 40 years' experience in counterinsurgency or infiltration operations. Folks, I cannot tell if we're going to break. Whoever's operating the studio, I'm not getting any audio in my headphone whatsoever with regard to the break music. So if you can do something to let me know when we're on break, that'd be great. Members of Army intelligence and others in the intelligence agencies are possibly involved in an infiltration counterinsurgency operation aimed at destabilizing the constitutional centers of power in the United States. These cults and other cause-oriented groups have been started or infiltrated by Aquino and his associates in order to control large numbers of people. It should be noted that all of these cults are closed systems with their own belief systems that are insular and separate from the reality that most people take for granted. These individuals are used to engage in antisocial acts that members of the greater society would not contemplate, including satanic ritual abuse programming and organized gang stalking. And folks, I will submit the NSA is just another one. Okay, so finally I can hear the break music. You're listening to the story behind the story, folks. Sorry about the technical difficulties. These things happen. We will be back after these messages in a few minutes for the final segment of today's The Story Behind the Story. We're talking again about the NSA, wiretapping, and our latest patriot to hit the airwaves, Edward Snowden. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
We interrupt this program for an urgent announcement. The power's gone and the lights are out. We now have an emergency situation. Time to light your emergency candle. Don't have any? Then it's time to order your supply of emergency grab-and-go candles from LisaKCandles.com. The emergency candles outperform even the most extreme conditions. They are soot and toxin-free and have a natural extended shelf life. The time is now, so don't delay. Have emergency candles from Lisa K Candles ready when you need them, so you remain in the light and out of the dark. Go to LisaKCandles.com. That's Lisa, the letter K, Candles.com. Or call 731-441-3293. That's 731-441-3293. We now return you to your regular scheduled program already in progress.
It's hard to imagine when things are going reasonably well, just how quickly things can change. But what would it take? Economic collapse, massive crop failure, chemical or biological attack? So many situations could find you in the grocery looking to pick up food for your family only to find that the shelves are empty. There's nothing. Don't let that happen. Act today to make sure that if it ever comes to that, you and your family will be provided for. Visit freezedryguy.com to look at the wide variety of survival foods available. Freeze-dried foods from the Freeze Dry Guy store longer, rehydrate faster, are nutritionally superior to, and taste better than any other long-term storage food available. Visit freezedryguy.com or call toll-free 866-404-3663. freezedryguy.com.
TheMicroEffectLive.com. The Micro Effect, Kamei, Idaho, where every day is a holiday.
Yes, sir.
Where every paycheck is a fortune.
Yes, sir.
Kamei, Idaho, where every meal is a banquet.
Yes, sir.
Where your instincts will serve you better than your government.
Yes, sir. I can hear you. Yes, sir.
TheMicroEffectLive.com. The Micro Effect, a worldwide broadcast on the internet and on KU band satellite. Telstar 5, Transponder 5, themicroeffectlive.com. Don't miss it.
Yes, sir.
All right, folks, we're back. Again, we're here on the 11th of June, 2013. This is a live show. Again, we apologize for technical difficulties in past days. True has had some unfortunate things happen, causing him to not be available on the mic for his last two shows. Rest assured, he's okay. He's not being visited by men in black or, none of that. It's just weird life stuff that happens to all of us. This last segment, folks, today we've all been all I've been talking about today is the NSA. It's the topic du jour as this guy Edward Snowden came out of the woodwork over the weekend and chose to unveil some secrets that he knew from having worked for the NSA. And thus, in my mind, permanently etching himself in the Hall of Fame of true patriots who, let's pray he doesn't martyr himself in the process, but certainly he's now been targeted in a way that will forever change his life, if not end it. I pray not. We're going to spend this last few minutes today. I'm just going to describe to you folks a little bit about what's going on currently with the NSA. And their whole deal in this Camp Williams facility. Okay, Camp Williams, Utah. Probably don't know about it. It's nothing they're talking about on any media channel whatsoever. The only people to do any kind of writing on it whatsoever turns out to be Wired magazine, and then anyone else who jumped on the bandwagon after that, pretty much paraphrasing and restating what the journalists in Wired magazine put forward. But going to Wikipedia and looking up this Utah data center in Camp Williams, we read, the National Security Agency is building the $1.5 billion Community Comprehensive National Cybersecurity Initiative Data Center at Camp Williams, the first in a series of data centers required for the Comprehensive National Cybersecurity Initiative. The 1.5 million square foot facility, built on 200 acres, is expected to store 1 yottabyte of data by 2015. And folks, a yottabyte, yottabyte, is 10 to the 24th, and is the largest number that has a name. If they want to describe a number bigger, they're going to have to come up with a new name for it, because Yada is as far as it goes on the descriptive. It's it's Bazinga, it's Jazinga, it's more megabytes than can possibly be written down by anybody. The facility, which is expected to be completed in October 2013, will use 65 megawatts of power and will cost another $2 billion for hardware, software, and maintenance. Camp Williams' former airfield, located on the west side highway of Highway 68, has been removed. Instead, the area that formerly held the airfield will now hold the NSA's new data processing center, the Utah Data Center. This facility will greatly increase the NSA's ability to store and process millions of emails, IMs, SMS messages, and phone calls made daily by people around the world and in the United States. Then we go to look at, Comprehensive National Cybersecurity Initiative. What's that? The Comprehensive National Cybersecurity Initiative, or CNCI, was established by President George W. Bush in National Security Presidential Directive 54 and Homeland Security Presidential Directive 23, otherwise known as NSPD 54, HSPD 23, in January of 2008. The initiative outlines U.S. cybersecurity goals and spans multiple agencies, including DHS, the Office of Management and Budget, and the NSA. The initial signing of the initiative and hearings about the initiative during 2008 were kept classified. However, in March 2010, the Obama administration declassified limited material regarding the project. The current goals of the initiative include establishing a front line of defense against network intrusion, defending the U.S. against the full spectrum of threats through counterintelligence, and strengthening the future cybersecurity environment through education, coordination, and research. On January 26, 2011, the NSA began building the first in a series of data centers pursuant to the program. The $1.5 billion Community Comprehensive National Cybersecurity Initiative Data Center, also known as Utah Data Center, is located in Camp Williams. You go to Utah Data Center, and you get the layout. It's got 4 giant data halls, each 25,000 square feet each. It's got its own power substation, backup generators, fuel tanks. It's got a chiller plant that can pump 1.6 million gallons of water to keep the system from overheating. The Visitor Control Center, which is $9.7 million just at the gate with biometric identification, the whole works, to control who goes in and out of this place. The purpose statement. The data center is alleged to be able to process, quote, all forms of communication, including the complete contents of private emails, cell phone calls, and internet searches, as well as all sorts of personal data trails, parking receipts, travel itineraries, bookstore purchases, and other digital pocket litter, unquote. In response to claims that the data center would be used to illegally monitor emails of U.S. citizens, an NSA spokesperson said, quote, many unfounded allegations have been made about the planned activities of the Utah Data Center. One of the biggest misconceptions about NSA is that we are unlawfully listening in on or reading emails of U.S. citizens. This is simply not the case, unquote. Oh, goodness. I'm going to have to click the edit button because that's just not true now, is it anymore, folks? Oh, that's just funny. Yeah, well, we're finding out that, in fact, that is the case. And I'll come back to that. It's just, I'm sorry, folks. I'm laughing real hard. The NSA, and I will invite you all to read this article by Wired. describing it. It's in Wired magazine. It was written in March of 2012. It's entitled, "The NSA is building the country's biggest spy center," and then in parentheses, "watch what you say." And I don't have time to read this whole thing. I'll give you a brief taste of the beginning of it. And then there's one other thing I want to read to just bring you up to date on where we're at on this whole thing. Basically, it starts with a little blurb. "The NSA has become the largest, most covert, and potentially most intrusive intelligence agency ever." And it goes on. "The spring air in the small, sand-dusted town has a soft haze to it. Clumps of green-gray sagebrush rustle in the breeze. It's the heart of Mormon country, near Wasatch Range to the east and Oquirrh Mountains to the west, where religious pioneers arrived more than 160 years ago. They came as to escape the rest of the world, to understand the mysterious words sent down from their God, as revealed on buried golden plates, and to practice what has become known as the principle, marriage to multiple wives. Today, Bluffdale is home to one of the nation's largest sects of polygamists, the Apostolic United Brethren, with upwards of 9,000 members. The Brethren's complex includes a chapel, a school, a sports field, and an archive. Membership has doubled since 1978, and the number of plural marriages has tripled. So they've been looking for ways to purchase more land and expand. But new pioneers have quietly begun moving into the area because secret outsiders who say little and keep to themselves. Like the pious polygamists, they are focused on deciphering cryptic messages that only they have the power to understand. Just off Beef Hollow Road, less than a mile from the Brethren headquarters, thousands of hard-hatted construction workers in sweat-soaked t-shirts are laying the groundwork for the newcomer's own temple and archive, a massive complex so large that it necessitated expanding the town's boundaries. Once built, it's going to be more than 5 times the size of the U.S. Capitol. Rather than Bibles, prophets, and worshipers, this temple will be filled with servers, computer intelligence experts, and armed guards. Instead of listening for words flowing down from heaven, these newcomers will be secretly capturing, storing, and analyzing vast quantities of words and images hurling through the world's telecommunication networks. Under construction by contractors with top-secret clearances, the blandly named Utah Data Center is being built for the NSA. And folks, this thing is supposed to be done September 2013. I would venture to say it's pretty much up and running right now. I'll jump to a paragraph here. "This is more than just a data center," says one senior intelligence official who, until recently, was involved with the program. "The mammoth Bluffdale Center will have another important and far more secret role than until now has gone unrevealed. It's also critical," he says, "for breaking codes. Code breaking is crucial because much of the data the center will handle, financial information, stock transactions, business deals, foreign military, diplomatic secrets, legal documents, confidential personal communications, will be heavily encrypted." According to another top official also involved with the program, the NSA made an enormous breakthrough several years ago on its ability to cryptanalyze or break unfathomably complex encryption systems employed not only by governments around the world, but by many average computer users in the U.S. The upshot, according to this official, everybody's a target. Everybody with communication is a target. And I'm going to stop on that, folks, but I'm going to encourage, again, everyone to go and read this article. It's pretty much one of the first looks anyone ever got publicly. Certainly guys like Truott and others have been looking into this for a long time. But we go now to, okay, Edward Snowden, and he's got more revelations. Certainly, hopefully, if he's done his work properly, he will be bringing forth more data about this nefarious group, the NSA. And mind you, folks, the NSA is as we've seen before in topics of pedophilia and child trafficking and this sort of thing. They've become very instrumental in helping groups like the CIA's The Finders, right? And groups mentioned in films like the Franklin Scandal. Conspiracy of Silence, talking about the Franklin Scandal, Boys Town, and so forth. Okay, these guys are up to their eyeballs in this stuff. Certainly with guys like Michael Aquino high up in their ranks, you can bet your bottom dollar, folks, that not only are they involved in monitoring everyone, they're involved in covering up some very shady activities. And for more on that, I'm going to refer everybody back to the Monarch program. Learn about it. Read the documentation. See the documentary films. They're all available publicly for free. YouTube and other places have them. Monarch, the New Phoenix Program by Marshall Thomas. Anyone not up to speed at all on any of this should be able to get up to speed quickly and understand the tie-ins. And folks, this has everything to do with what True was talking about at his ConspiracyCon presentation this past weekend. We talk about weather modification. We talk about HARP. We talk about these flotillas of giant, beam weapon power floating around on these giant, like, oil derrick-sized things. I mean, these things are massive. It looks like right out of Star Wars. It's crazy. And these giant white bubbles sitting on top of them. And we learn, well, they're 6 to 8 times stronger than HARP. Each one of them. We now have 5 of them, apparently. They're floating around. No one can get near them. And they can do their zap, their Death Star weather zapping, targeting any location in the world from anywhere in the world. I mean, it's HARP on steroids. Okay? Well, one of these things can, some aspects of how these things have been designed, and the whole gamut of scalar weaponry, okay, it's all frequency based. And basically, if you have a control over a giant super duper microwave that can be dialed up to any frequency and lots of different power energy ranges, well, there are lots of things you can do with it. You can affect visible light. You can affect invisible light. You can affect radio telecommunications. You can affect spin resonant particles so as to disturb areas of the atmosphere. You can shoot giant energy beams to create fields of plasma to act like mirrors. You can project imagery. And you can also tap into this topic of beam weapon psychotronic mind control to not only give you the sensation that there literally are voices in your head, but complete altering of one's perception of reality. It could change what you think you're seeing or hearing or feeling, targeting the function of specific organs, the drivable versions of these things. They call them LRAD, for long-range acoustic device. And it's just a microwave dish on top of a Hummer, basically. You see one of these things, go the other way, because they're not good for you. And they can be dialed. They have, for maximum crowd efficiency, set to stun, like a phaser. But, they can dial that thing up to fry. And, those are the microwave beam weapons. We're not even talking about the lasers that they've developed. We've seen MFEL and Miracle, chemical lasers, deployed by satellite, causing the deep water horizon ruptures. But now they got these things, MFEL, and they can put them on. They got them on ships. They got them on Hummers. These are drivable, high-energy lasers that can, track incoming missiles, Star Wars style, but they can also just, at the end of the battlefield, reduce in a millisecond, someone to about a quarter their size and just a crispy toasted remnant. We've seen lots of this experimentation going on in the fields of Iraq with inexplicable consequences and no other conclusion but to say, oh, they're experimenting with some new high energy stuff. Okay, so Iraq is basically the testing field for the stuff that they're probably going to use on us domestically, and the NSA's got their, they're up to their eyeballs in the development of this stuff. So the latest thing, you got Rand Paul saying, I'm going to sue, the violate. Okay, sure, Rand Paul, you go for it. You go on with your bad self, and I hope it works for you. And, if you're able to march anything through the U.S. court system, and remember, folks, we've been talking about common law on this show. If you're trying to march it through existing law, it's a charade. I believe strongly Rand Paul knows that. I believe he's no other than a chip off the old block, and that is to say Ron Paul, I've always suspected of being a controlled opposition representative, a pressure release valve. I've traced him to be a member of the Rosicrucian order, and that right there is enough said. But the latest article here, and then again, this is, folks, if you really want to see some up to the minute, wide open commentary and discussion on articles that are coming out on this issue, check in with zerohedge.com and hold on to your hats, because you're going to get a couple opinions that you may not have read anywhere else. But the latest article, Supreme Court standoff next. ACLU sues Obama over the constitutionality of the NSA surveillance. If the constitutional scholar was hoping he would quietly avoid a major showdown over the constitutionality of the biggest spying scandal since Nixon, which, whether legal or not, remains to be determined, and which would likely have led to an early POTUS retirement, POTUS, President of the United States, retirement if current president was a Republican, the ACLU just slammed the door shut on the possibility. Moments ago, the American Civil Liberties Union filed a lawsuit against the Obama administration over its dragnet collection of logs of domestic phone calls, contending that the once secret program is illegal, and asks a judge to both stop it and orders the records purged. As the NYT reports, quote, the lawsuit filed in New York could set up an eventual Supreme Court test, unquote. Only, once that happens, it will be too bad that InTrade is no longer available to take the other side of a trade that believes the SCOTUS, Supreme Court, will for once do the right thing and preserve the Constitution when everyone knows the decision to formally enact a Big Brother state will pass along party lines, political party lines, and America will officially become the country that for 5 decades, at least superficially, it was waging Cold War against. And this is from the New York Times, and we'll probably take this until we're out for today. Thanks again and for everybody joining us. The program, all right, well, that's it. We're pretty much out of time. Again, folks, ACLU just getting ready to sue. We've got a lot of fallout over this. We'll probably be talking more about this tomorrow, folks. I'll be back again for Wednesday's show tomorrow. Same bat time, same bat channel, God willing. You folks have a great evening and rest of your day tomorrow, and hopefully we'll all meet here again tomorrow, and we'll talk some more about this. Until then, God bless all of you. Keep you safe. We'll see you next time.
This program for an urgent announcement. The power's gone and the lights are out.